Hey y'all, it's Chimdi. So I want to talk about money and poverty and trauma and Uber Eats, okay? Because I ran the numbers. What really got me together in terms of my budget was running the numbers and seeing how much I was spending every month on Uber Eats. And I literally just ran the numbers again to see over the course of 4 or so months from got back here in December all the way to April, I have spent $1,500 on Uber Eats. And I don't know exactly what I've called this video, but the title I'm thinking of is like Uber Eats is a trauma response, because I was literally ordering Uber Eats almost every other day, if not every single day. I think I had days where I would order it twice a day instead of going to the grocery store and cooking food and eating food in my house. And I would do that too, but I was really relying on Uber Eats. And then I went to this silent retreat as a part of the Timeless Wisdom training, which is this 2-year trauma healing program I'm in. That training was at this retreat center that did all Ayurvedic food. They did meals, obviously breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So we're having 3 meals a day cooked by someone else and meals that are super healthy. And after a week sort of detoxing and trauma healing and eating this food at the center, and like really good food too. Also, my sister is vegan, which I think helps. I came back from that retreat center and I was like, I'm gonna keep it going in terms of diet. I immediately went to the grocery store. I bought a bunch of groceries. I bought seitan, that fake chicken. Like I bought butternut squash to start making soups. Like I was really out here cooking, chopping things up. Every morning during the retreat, I would eat oatmeal, potatoes, and like some fresh fruit basically. So I literally recreated those meals when I got back. And it's now been about a month since I left and I have not ordered Uber Eats since. Not unlike smoking weed, when I have the urge to order Uber Eats, I'm like, what's going on in my emotional world? What's going on spiritually? What's going on energetically that I'm not trying to deal with, that I may be feeling overwhelmed by, and that I'm using Uber Eats as a way to sort of numb myself and not deal with it and just going for the convenience of it, you know? So I want to talk about that because I read this great book and it's called Running on Empty, Overcoming Your Childhood Emotional Neglect. What got me is the title. Because, well, first off, I was Googling books about emotional neglect. If you follow my newsletter, then you know about this already. The link is below. It's got On My Spirit. So I talked about this book and I talked about being proactive about, you know, having this childhood neglect and wanting to really see, you know, what I could do about it. Running on Empty got me because I'm dealing with, you know, credit card debt and my finances, and I could tell this was something that was said at the silent retreat that really stuck with me from Thomas Hubel. Was like, we see only what we can see, and what we can't see, we'll just run into difficulties. So if there's areas of your life where you just keep running into difficulties, there's probably something you're missing. And so in this area of my finances and in like spending all this money on Uber Eats, I was like, yeah, this is a difficulty, you know? Like I know that this is not me living in full alignment. I know there's some kind of unconscious activity at play here. I don't know what it is, obviously. If I knew what it is, I wouldn't do it. But I just have this urge and this compulsion, and I don't feel empowered to go to the grocery store. So I live in the suburbs of Maryland, and I don't have a car. I either have my sister drive me to the grocery store and we like go shopping together, and she's totally like open and willing to do that for me, or I literally will walk like 20-30 minutes to the grocery store. I live a really interesting like prairie home companion type life right now. And what I noticed when I came back from the retreat is I went walking maybe dusk. I don't use that word in my real life often. I think dusk is the morning. No, dusk is the nighttime one. I think the sun had actually already set, but you know, there was still light in the sky. And that's when I was starting my like 20-25 minute walk, right? And what I noticed was like genuine fear in my body, you know? And I live in the suburbs. It is very safe. Well, you know how it is, but you know what I mean? Like it's very safe. I've never been accosted. Nothing's ever happened. Like it's totally fine. But in my body, walking alone, it felt like, oh no, girl, like, are you gonna be okay kind of thing. If you've been on my channel for a bit, you know I traveled with remote ear and had a pretty serious incident happen while I was traveling in Malaysia. So I know that played a role, and I processed a bit of that trauma while I was in the silent retreat. So I know that I've been through things that have made me, you know, that have made me be like, think twice about walking by myself on the streets, you know? But I knew, and this is I think what is so beautiful about meditating and about trauma healing, is how you can just create space between these ideas and these stories you tell yourself and what's the reality of the world you're in, basically. And so I had enough space to say, I am scared, but I know it's based on my past. It's not based on the reality I'm in. And so I'm gonna walk with this feeling, and I'm gonna presence this feeling, and I'm not gonna let this feeling overwhelm me or tell me to sort of turn around. And that's exactly what I did. And this was like, yeah, within a couple of days of coming back from the retreat. So I was still like super raw, and I was like still like breaking out into like spontaneous crying. Like it was still pretty intense, but I needed food, you know, and I didn't want to order Uber Eats anymore. And so I did it, you know, and that really started this new way of living my life. And there have been a lot of articles that talk about how expensive it is to be poor, actually, because, you know, it costs $1,500 to live a life on Uber Eats versus a couple $100s in the grocery store to like buy these actual foods and eat it yourself. But the difference is you need the capacity to think. There's so many things you need. First, you need to be connected enough to your body to really value that you're living in it. Like I used to smoke a lot of weed, which I talk about, and I used to eat a lot of junk food. And I've tried on and off with being, you know, vegetarian and vegan and pescatarian and all these different types of things to modify my diet. But I think a really important thing is like when you are only so-so about being here and life, and you kind of see it as like this burden, this thing you kind of have to get through, the focus really isn't on like, how can my body be the healthiest possible? It's like, how can I just get through this day? Like, what do I need to just get through this day that I'm in right now? It's like a very different orientation. So first you need to have enough connection to your body that you're like, oh, I love it here. This is great. I love this. And how could it perform even better? You know, what do I have to feed it? And you're able to make those connections between like, oh, like I ate this red meat burger and now I feel like crap. Maybe I don't eat that anymore. You know, and you're actually able to then follow through with that. And then if you're like, okay, I want to start eating healthy, you have the capacity to like go online or like buy a cookbook and actually start looking at recipes, and then get your butt to the grocery store, buy all the different ingredients, bring that home, chop all that stuff up, sprinkle in these different seasonings, be standing up at that stove, tossing things around, all because at the end you want to have 25 minutes tops of like eating a nice meal you've made. And of course the feeling in your body afterwards where you feel really good. And for years that was just not my relationship to food. That wasn't my relationship to my body. That wasn't my relationship to healthy eating. I've had moments of it, but I've noticed a really significant adjustment with the trauma healing. And I also want to talk about discipline, because something that was so helpful with that emotional neglect book is that it talks about how emotional neglect comes from the omission of something. So it's not the commission of an act on you, you know, that you can remember like, oh, this bad thing happened to me. It's all the stuff that didn't happen. It's all the hugs that weren't given. It's all the like presence witnessing that wasn't given. It's all the like explanations of like wild changes in your life that like weren't talked to you about. You know, it's like all these things that were missing. So you may look at your life, I'm assuming you don't have any of the big traumas, and be like, I had a good childhood. Like, I don't understand why I'm not more successful at my job or like living in my alignment and like, and we certainly don't want to blame our parents because we're like, they did the best they could, you know? The book is written by a doctor, by a psychiatrist, and she asked her patients like, did you feel that your parents loved you? And they'll always say, I know they loved me. And then they'll point to different things. You know, we had food on the table, we had a roof over our head, all these different things, right? But then she's like, but did you feel that love? And that's so important. One of the things that happens if you aren't supported emotionally as a child is that discipline, self-discipline, becomes really, really hard. Because what happens is that when you are growing up as a child, if your parent is present for you, they'll be able to say, okay, like, make sure you have to do your homework for 1 hour before you go outside to play, or bedtime is 9 p.m. every night, or like, when the lights get dark, you need to come in from outside. Like, all these different things, all these different structures that the parent is passing down to you, which then you then internalize and carry with you as you grow up. If you didn't have that, and I know for me, bedtime where? Like, I was doing whatever, like, I was doing whatever I wanted. Listen, you know, like, it was much more about not getting into trouble. So if you weren't getting into trouble, essentially you were running free. And of course we like freedom. And so as an adult, I found myself really having to work intentionally on creating that kind of self-discipline and doing things like cooking healthy meals and enough to eat for 2 to 3 meals a day every single day takes an enormous amount of self-discipline. It's way easier to just open an app, press a couple buttons, and then have food delivered to your door in 20-30 minutes. Like that's like the most easiest, most convenient thing. When I was doing all this trauma healing and being super overwhelmed, because the way I was approaching trauma healing was very intense. I was not just allowing things to arise. I was like, let's go find this trauma and get it. So as a result, I was constantly putting myself into states of overwhelm. Lesson learned, kind of. Yeah, I did not have the capacity to like go and then chop up some onions and throw it in a dish. By the way, someone asked me about like the alpha states thing in a video about like not smoking weed, because in my video about that I mentioned the way like onions and garlic affect your brainwaves and stuff. And I had never heard of that before. I just watched Chef's Table, and it was the episode with the monk, and she mentions how she does not cook with onions or garlic or scallions, any of that stuff, because of the way like it has its own energy, but if your goal is to like be meditating and stuff, like it creates too much light. And I was like, whoa! But yeah, to be chopping up these onions and these potatoes and these butternut squashes and these candied yams and stuff. I made candied yams for the first time. I think they were pretty good. Yeah, it takes a lot of emotional effort, and truly I feel like now is the only time in my life where I'm able to just really, there's a joy in doing it and there's a fun in doing it, and it's not fully overwhelming, though I just like a couple of days ago was like, I wouldn't mind some Nando's. I wouldn't mind some Nando's peri peri chicken wings. And that's how I knew that I was going through it. I work with creatives a lot because I'm a creative coach, and often what I'll support people with is that they have this like idea in their head and they are really talented as artists, but they need support and like, okay, like they'll mention having like an ADHD brain, or like, okay, I need support with getting this on paper, breaking this down step by step. And I love doing that for people because I really do love and crave structure. So I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, I'm more than happy to help you do that. What the book was so helpful to me for was realizing like it's not like a personal defect. Like you can point to things from your own experience growing up that are like part of the reason why these things that you think should be coming naturally, or that you see maybe come naturally to other people, aren't showing up for you. Like it's not about you, like it's about these other experiences. And I'm so grateful that I read that book. Something that the book talked about as well is that there's a lot of self-blame and self-criticism and lots of like, you should do better. Because if you have parents who are emotionally present for you, they're able to be calm and collected and like resonant and all these things, attuned to you. And so when you make a mistake, they're able to like really help you understand, here's why it was a mistake, just that and the third. And then that creates a voice in you, like your own internal dialogue becomes this voice of like, okay, well, we made this mistake. What are we gonna do differently? Da, 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 da. Like it's this like measured, reasonable voice. But if we don't have any voice, we either tend to be like super duper critical of ourselves. Like, how could you do this? You're so irresponsible. What were you thinking? Make better choices. You know better than this. Or super duper lax. Like, you know what? You deserve it. You work hard. You should get to get those Uber Eats. It's not a big deal. You tip well. You're supporting the economy. Like, so it's this huge like swing between these two opposites. And that's not because of some personal defect you have. It's because possibly you didn't get the emotional support you needed when you were young to create a healthy voice inside of your own head. So I just want to share this with you because I know it was very eye-opening for me, because I really did not draw the connection between emotional neglect and some of these things like self-discipline and self-criticism. It was very comforting to realize, like, because the book includes like all these different things you can do to support yourself and all these different ways emotional neglect will show up in your life. And in a lot of different ways, I was actually doing pretty good, you know? And while reading the book, I was like, oh, the emotional neglect I experienced was far more than I realized, you know? So both of those things were true. And it just felt really good to know that, one, not only am I not alone in this, because there's a whole book written about this, but all these things that I would criticize myself for, blame myself about, or say you need to do better, it's actually like, yeah, super normal and a total result of these things that, you know, weren't really in my control. What I'm so grateful for with trauma healing is just how much you realize that it's not your fault bad things happen to you, you know? Like it's so easy when we're taught cause and effect to be like, oh, if something bad happened to me, I did something to deserve it. Like we create this 1-to-1 ratio. The book walks through like the 10 different types of emotionally neglectful parents. And one of the biggest types is parents who've been emotionally neglected themselves. So they can't pass on what they didn't have, you know? So to realize that it's not a function of who you are or what you deserve or the quality of your soul, it's a reflection of, you know, the circumstances you are in. And if you are motivated, you can read a book about it and you can find out what's really going on, and you can take these practical steps every single day to really make a difference for yourself. So I want to offer that to you because it was really helpful for me. Thank you to the Patreon people. If you want some coaching, you can DM me at Coaching by Chimdi or sign up for Discovery Call below. I help artists create consistently and authentically. And subscribers, thank you for being the sexiest to literally ever do it. You blessed me by subscribing to my channel. I'll see you on the next video. Bye!